What's up, guys? It's Dave here at Blind Spot. Have two special guests with me today. One familiar face, Charlie Horky. Thanks for joining me again. Appreciate it. If you don't know, Charlie Horky is from SLADE Services. They are a transportation management company based in Las Vegas with service around the world. For most of you in my industry, you know the guy below me, Robert Alexander. He is the NLA president, National Limousine Association president, and he is the president of RMA Limousine. Thanks for joining us, Robert. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's nice to be here.
Hey, Robert. People already know Charlie. I don't need Charlie to go talk again 15 minutes about himself. So give
Hey, can I talk about Charlie? Is that okay if I talk about?
Yeah, you know what? We'll give you a 20-minute allotment. That's all you're allowed to do about yourself and Charlie. So, Robert, give us some background.
Oh boy, I don't want to put anybody to sleep. That's my first and foremost rule. I'm not here to cure insomnia. What do you want to know? I own RMA Worldwide. We have offices in Boston, New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia, Princeton, Baltimore, Rockville, Washington, D.C., Prince George's County, Richmond, and kind of L.A. But California, as you know, Dave, is just a nightmare to work from a labor perspective.
For sure.
So we have there, and obviously a global network like everybody else. And we've been fortunate to do some successful acquisitions, and the best was doing one about 2 weeks right before a pandemic. Not everybody can be that lucky.
You're Addison Lee as well, aren't you?
Correct, and we purchased Addison Lee, but now that's been the name is converted to RMA as well. So that puts us at the height over 600 vehicles or so. So maybe a little bit more than that. But we have everything from motor coaches to minibuses to Vanteras.
Public information?
What's that?
Is that name change public information?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So public information at this point, right?
Yeah, I would have gone, Charlie, we used to be Addison Lee.
I don't know. That's a huge surprise for me.
What's that?
That's a huge surprise for me. I would have thought that you would have wanted to keep that name.
No. Addison Lee is still alive in the UK, and to be polite, there just wasn't a lot of brand equity here in the States.
Okay.
I mean, it was Tim Rose and Mike Fogarty all did a great job, but some of the strategy from the UK wasn't quite as sound. And so I was fortunate to create an opportunity for me where we could come in and purchase the company, and now we're branding it all to RMA. So it's one consistent thing, and get everybody on the same software. But we're not here to talk about me. We're here to talk about Charlie and Dave.
Come on. No, I really appreciate you, Robert, because obviously prior to the pandemic, you did acquire a massive other company, and unfortunately, you didn't know that 2 weeks later, the worst pandemic the United States have seen in the last 90 years plus was going to hit us, maybe 100 years, and so we are here now. We're all healthy. That's the main thing. Everything else can be rebuilt. So we wish you the best of luck with that.
Thank you. It's been quite the experience, and you throwing that being president of the NLA during a pandemic. So it's been keeping me very busy, but I'm glad to be able to do what I'm doing.
They're lucky to have you. Let me tell you. You could have Scott Colombrino.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to change the subject.
Hold on, folks.
Shots fired!
Or about anybody before you. I mean, what the hell?
Well, let's not get into that. I think let's talk about what we're talking about here. And the topic of today's videocast is the NLA's change into why to choose car service over anybody else. Doesn't matter who that anybody else is. Car service companies in general. And so, Robert, if you don't mind giving us a little bit of background of how the NLA, where NLA was, where NLA is now, and why you made that decision that's what you wanted us to focus on.
Sure. Early on, we hired Evans, who's our PR company out of New York, and they do a phenomenal job. And I think early on, the strategy when we first kind of started working with them was kind of we put together a TNC defense fund, and it was to raise money to hire Evans to kind of battle the TNCs, to kind of say, hey, this is what they are, and it's not good, and we don't like it, and they're not regulated, and the drivers are going to rape you and rough you up, and just a bunch of bad stuff. And that was kind of the NLA's thought. I mean, the membership at the time was really getting hurt early on and didn't quite know what to make of this new entry into the marketplace. And so the NLA reacted as they thought appropriately at the time, as to, let's discredit them if we can. And that kind of went on. We had Pamela Anderson do some ride responsibly videos and the like. And then I think, with the pandemic and with everything else been going on, that the narrative has changed. I can say, since I started running the NLA, or being the president rather, that with the pandemic, it's more the energy is put on what do we do better, what do we do differently, and why are we the right choice. And I think for me, it's a more sound strategy. It's always, I'd much rather tell maybe a potential client why I'm good, not why my competition is bad. And so to kind of follow that path, that now, we just did the cleaning video, which fortunately it was well received. And, a lot of people are self-branding it and using it for the like to let people know that, that we care about their safety and security inside, a member's car. And so instead of, bashing them, it's really chauffeured cars a good choice for these reasons. And that's kind of the messaging we're trying to get out to the marketplace now.
I think that's pretty awesome. I think it's really nice to get away from the bashing to just really talking about why we are just better. I mean, and I think there's a lot of people in the industry that have been thinking this. And prior to us getting on the call, I was thinking about, okay, let's not bash, but then you start to think of all the negatives, and that's bashing. And then you start to think about, okay, so how can we have a conversation that's a healthy conversation to teach our clients, why to use us rather than them. And I think that over the last couple of years, we've seen the community is starting to see the negatives. So we don't need to keep pushing out the negatives. So I think this is great that the NLA is making that move. You talk about stuff that differentiates us from them, that makes us quote unquote better. Can you give us some examples?
Well, yeah, I think, first of all, I just want to slight back up and say, because something's different doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. And so Uber's different than what we are. And I think, it'd be hard not to make an argument that there is a place for them somewhat in the ecosystem. If you've been out and had too much to drink, let's just say you need to get home and you live close by, I don't think most people would use services like the ones we represent. Right. And so maybe they would have used a taxi cab, but we didn't seem to scream about them. So now I think the important thing is figuring out when is the best time to use our service, and making sure when people make that decision that whoever's watching this, their company is in the conversation to be a choice. And I think by making us a choice, you have to say, what's your differentiator? And the differentiator that we're talking about is making sure the cars are cleaned in between each and every ride, not be a transaction like Uber and Lyft where, they get as many people in the cars as they can. And also, I think to be fair, to have a fair argument, there's a differential between Uber X and Uber Black, right? Or Lyft Lux and Lyft. And you could say, Lyft Lux and Lyft Black, they have their place. And there may be people watching this who do both kind of work and maybe they're good. But Uber X is a glorified taxi, right? And so I think that the member companies who are highlighting the fact that a car comes back and it is cleaned professionally every night, the chauffeurs are trained to wear masks or are wiping down the car in between each ride. I think it's all these little touches that separate us from them. And I'm sure Charlie has some thoughts on that as well.
Who subscribes to the NLA? Like, who's your audience?
Anybody from a one car operator on up to a large fleet. I mean, when you say who are the members?
Well, I guess. I mean, maybe I have this wrong, but you have this one program before your time there where we're talking about how messed up the TNCs are, right? And now we've changed it about what's better about us, correct?
Well, yeah. I mean, go ahead.
And so the audience, but who's your audience? The limousine industry?
Well, no, I think where we've been very fortunate is we've gotten a lot of traction so like the video we just came, we're launching that to the New York Times or whoever it would be. And we've been fortunate.
That's what I was wondering, because I mean, it all sounds great, but gosh, yeah, if you're doing that, then you're creating some kind of awareness in the general public, or the people that understand, who the NLA is. And the NLA has a much stronger voice in the community of clients. Then I'm all for it. I think that's great.
And that's exactly what we're using Evans to increase our reach. Where I've been, the San Francisco Chronicle interviewed me, and I've been interviewed by a good number of Business Travel Magazine, the Company Dime, these other things that corporate travel managers will read and the like. And I think it's having a compelling story, something that's of interest, something that's different and unique. Saying we pick people up and take them where they want to go just isn't quite enough anymore. And so having that, so to speak, in our arsenal as to what makes us different. And then what you hope for is, I hope, guys like you, Charlie, and Dave, take this cleaning video and send it out to your clients. And maybe your client, then your client passes it on. The whole idea is to change the narrative, to get people to think, you know what, using a chauffeured car is a smart choice. Yeah,
I'll absolutely use it.
Yeah, and I could just tell you that we built kind of, I don't know, probably 2 weeks after the pandemic and everybody started talking about cleaning, my fleet manager was like, hey, let's build a video. And we built our own little video. Some people saw it, some people didn't, whatever. And I got a lot of good feedback, because a lot of the clients that I deal with are kind of like your Robert, where it's, corporate clientele. They're not, they're price conscious, but not super price conscious, but we try to be fair in all those aspects. And a lot of them came back and said, this is the kind of information we need. We need to see that you're being proactive and you're being cognizant about this invisible thing. And you made the comment invisible. And I really liked what you said earlier prior to this call. And it's kind of, you had an example basically of something you saw this weekend, which I've seen multiple times. But until you kind of just talked about it, we were talking about the people that are using the TNCs. Are they really your client? And so can you talk about the thing that you saw this weekend and kind of how you got thinking about things?
Yeah. And part two of that is I took this back to my company and it started a conversation. And what that was is that I was out driving around and I look over and I'm at a stoplight, and next to me is a car with the U sticker on it. And it's obviously an Uber sticker, and there's a passenger in the back, and I believe he was wearing a mask. And in the front was the driver, and the car was fairly clean and all. But the driver, and I use the word driver intentionally, wasn't wearing a mask. So it says to me, well, Uber says, we make all of our drivers wear masks. Well, there's no policing of that. I mean, this guy is a gig worker. It's his side job or whatever it would be. And because, Big Brother Uber says I have to wear a mask, there's no follow-up. And that's the difference, where we have the follow-up. If it was one of my chauffeurs and he wasn't wearing a mask, well, there'd be somebody else, filling his slot, so to speak. Is that someone needs to hold people accountable, trust but verify, if you will. And so I went back and I said, and I remember we had I don't know 30 people on a Zoom call or something for the whole company, and I said, should we require our chauffeurs to wear masks all the time? And everybody was kind of like, why would you suggest such a thing? I said, because our vehicles, a lot of them have tinted windows, and you don't know if somebody's in the back of the car or not. And if someone looks over the stoplight and sees the RMA stripe on the back and the RMA sticker, and they look over and the chauffeur's not wearing a mask, is that going to give somebody pause who might be using us tomorrow? And I think it's these things that we need to think about. And those are it's that type of thought.
Right.
Same reason like we always have our guy wear his jacket. There's no smoking in or around the car, because you never know who's going to look.
Right.
And I think it's these little differentiators that will set it for everything else we do.
Charlie, do you have any input on that before I do?
No, go ahead. I mean, I think it's great what he's doing. I can't imagine a chauffeur in service driving a car that says RMA or CLS or urban, and the guy's not wearing a mask. I wouldn't care if he's on duty or off duty. I mean, if that's the protocol, that's the protocol. It's one thing when I'm driving around town in my own personal car. That's my business. But right. It's not when you're, it's a stupid story, but
no story is stupid. Okay.
I had a guy bringing a car back to the yard one day, and he crashed it on the way in. and big stretch limousine, had his girlfriend sitting in the front seat. And I went and looked in the car, and there was the guys like beach towel, and they're like chairs and stuff, and they're already going to the beach. And the point of the story is they weren't thinking about business, and that's why I crashed the car. So I changed my rule, and I said, if you're dropping the car off, you got to wear your suit like you're going to work. And they were like really pissed. I said, hey, I don't care. If you're in that goddamn car, you got to wear the goddamn uniform. And that's the way it went. And it's the same thing with the mask. It's the same thing with the gloves. If they're in your car, no matter what they're doing, they got to be dressed appropriately. And that mask is now part of it.
Yeah.
I mean, we've made it, if you're driving one of our vehicles.
Aggravation. One dude sees your guy out wearing that mask, he's going to call you guys up and say, what the effing is going on? Yeah, all bad. And maybe he didn't call you first. Maybe he called the president of the company first. I don't know. I mean,
I mean, we were, like you mentioned, we require our drivers to wear a uniform when they're driving, in the sense of when they're in our vehicles. And so we've made a requirement that they have to have the mask on, even if they're not driving clients, because it's part of that brand. It's what we don't have the tinted windows like you, Robert. We're not allowed to do that.
No, the Suburban comes with them, or an Escalade automatically come with tinted windows.
Yeah, well, not the front seats, not ours.
No. But I'm saying my point was if you keep the back windows,
Right.
Nobody knows if there's a client in the car or not.
Correct. Yes,
that's why the chauffeur wears the mask. No, we don't tint the front windows. No.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. Yeah, no,
your guys' masks say like company's name on it?
No, we don't have those.
We do.
No,
I saw the president wearing a mask, and he had the presidential seal. And I mean, I use it as an example, but gosh, I think it would be nice if you did have black masks that did say RMA on them, because it's the uniform. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I
thought about it. The first time I looked at them, they were not inexpensive, and I thought, do we really need to spend money to have RMA logo on a mask? I mean, there's other places I think we could put our resources right now.
How much was it?
I hear you.
How much was it?
Mine was $20 for 4.
So $5.
Yeah, but you also, Robert, you have, I have 40 drivers. You have
10,000.
10,000.
Right, exactly. so it'd be like a $25,000 expense minimum, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you'll get a good ROI on that, man.
Oh yeah, I use you because of the way the masks look on your guys. No, I'm kidding.
No.
You're the best masks.
Oh wow, that was a good shot. That was awesome.
Oh, good fun.
Of course.
Yeah, I just wore a mask for this call. I didn't know what I was getting into.
No, you're totally fine. No mask required.
Two bald guys and Charlie.
Gloves too?
We don't do gloves. We don't do gloves.
No, gloves, you don't need them.
Why not?
I'm not a doctor, as we know. Just that's from what all of our understanding is, that they just don't really serve a purpose.
Okay.
Because they can also transmit. You can get in the glove and transmit or whatever.
Right.
It's I don't know if Dave wants to get into it, but it's the whole sneeze guard partition debate or not.
That doesn't work here.
Yeah, we didn't choose to do them. And the one thing no one really talked about, which would freak me out, is that, again, how long it lives on a surface is still slightly debatable from what I understand. Again, not being a scientist either. But no one ever really talked about, my concern was a client would get in the car, forget the airbags and accident and all that stuff. Client gets in the back of the car, he's like, oh, great, a sneeze guard. I'm going to take my mask off. I take my mask off. All of a sudden I sneeze and I get it on the sneeze guard, right? Now the chauffeur's got to clean it. So A, is exposed, and B, what if he misses a couple spots or whatever and somebody else brushes into it getting into the car or whatever it could be? The whole thing just freaks me out. Don't need it. No.
I can tell you that we, right away when people started talking about it, we said no. And that's just, I don't know if you saw me post about my uncle, who is pretty famous. He was involved in a really, really bad accident in Philadelphia with a cab where he actually smashed his face and had to have surgeries. And that's because, in cabs, they didn't require seatbelts. And I mean, I would tell you, our clientele, I would say 9 out of 10 don't wear seatbelts, even when you tell them to wear a seatbelt.
Really?
Yeah. No matter what, it's just what we've seat. And now I haven't been in a car. I haven't driven in. What's that?
They must be older, because I've never ran into anybody that was under 35 years old that when they got in the back didn't naturally put one on, and to ask them was only to remind them to do something they would have done had they thought about it.
Well, we remind everybody, put on your seatbelt, because, we see it on the dash. It tells you now who doesn't have a seatbelt on anymore. But we tell them, we don't force them. The whole thing with the mask and wearing a mask, nobody's had a question. They've all worn a mask, never took off a mask. We've had, unfortunately, some experience in the past couple of weeks. But the fact is that, with the seatbelt, my concern is you're sitting in the back seat and the driver suddenly has to do a complete stop, a hard brake, and now your passenger just ran into the back, that plastic, and then their face is shattered. No matter what the give is. I mean, I saw my uncle's face, and now there are, the plastics that are a lot giving. I know there's different companies doing that, but for us, we just felt like it's almost made you feel like you're back in a cab. I don't know. That's just my personal opinion. And so we just chose not to.
We're putting them in buses, and like our shuttle buses and the like, and that's per client request.
Okay.
And that I can kind of get, because you're literally walking right by, depending on how the bus is set up, you can be walking right by the chauffeur, right?
Okay.
And so maybe it's a good protector for both.
Okay.
That I don't feel it has the same accident profile that like a sedan or SUV does.
Now, are you just covering for the drivers?
Sorry?
You're just protecting the drivers, correct?
Yeah. And this is on like fixed route shuttles, stuff like that.
Buses?
Sorry?
How are you using the buses?
For fixed route shuttles, mainly, is what it would be. And some retail or corporate retail, but there's obviously not much of that work right now.
What do they say, like every other seat?
Yeah, every other seat. Right. And then we have spacing, and there's been some talk about the dividers between, but not a big fan of those.
Right. Yeah. And how would you mount? I mean, I guess there's a lot of ways of mounting, but it would just be, I think, more cumbersome. But let's get back onto, the whole car service. We talked about a little bit about pricing prior to this call, and I think that's something also we can talk about. Being that there are we know our clientele. Charlie, obviously, you have a different clientele that you provide. I would say we provide one level, and then you take it to the next level, or two, even in the sense of how you manage each trip and each coordination with the drivers and the cars and airplanes, all this kind of stuff. So you do a lot of a different kind of role than we do. But one of the things that I've even heard over the last couple of weeks is, we know you're more expensive than the TNCs, but that we don't care about that anymore because of the safety. But there have been prior, and this goes more to the limo operators and maybe 5 or 7 cars that have focused on being at or a little bit above what the TNC rates, which has caused them to now, unfortunately, have to close their doors. Robert, what kind of advice would you give to companies that are, 1 to 100 to think about pricing and how to continue to sustain while in this pandemic? Obviously, you don't have all the answers, but having the challenges of the TNCs.
I may need you to define that a little bit, but I just think right now, and I hope that people have used this time to look at their companies and a way to kind of reset everything. And I think pricing is part of that. And that I'm hoping that people have looked at their efficiencies and built a more efficient model, maybe. And I think rate is a reflection of that. Again, Charlie's in a little bit different. I mean, we do a lot of the work Charlie does, but he's permanently in a different kind of stratosphere for that kind of thing, where his people are really looking for, the great thing is truly a service, where a lot of, the corporate clientele are looking to get to point A to point B without incident in a clean car driven by a professional chauffeur, right? But with that comes certain sense of price sensitivity. And it's not necessarily whether it's your down the street competitor or whether it's a TNC. But I think that, the most first and foremost, you have to build your model so that you're profitable and a reasonable amount of profitability. And everybody's got their own threshold for that. But I think they need to build an efficient system where you can bolt on more work and not have to add people or vehicles. And so I think that's how you win against the TNC, because I don't think the solution to profitability necessarily is raising your rates. I think it's two-pronged. It's having fair and competitive rates and operating at a very efficient point. And that's something we've looked at and we're doing and changing at RMA. I don't want to, belabor the point.
Yourself. Yeah. What about you? What's your thoughts, Charlie?
Well, a lot of them listening to you guys talk. I have a kind of a different perspective. What you two have to worry about is the reality in which you're clearly deployed with regard to your clientele and how grateful they are that you guys exist, as opposed to using Uber and Lyft. That might be a short-term thing. They get a vaccine and they're back riding with TNCs, perhaps. With regard to the 2 to 3 to 4 car guys, it isn't that I don't have any sympathy for them. It's that I'm just I'm not big on whining, and I'm not worried about the TNC. It's like, gosh, I know plenty of independent operators that hope and pray that I call, and they're happy to have my work. And the same with both you guys. And the same guy knows that when he's not hearing from us three or whoever, that he's going to get out there and he's going to be Uber Black, and he's going to do a great job, and he's going to give the same service to those guys as he gives to us. And when he has to do an Uber X ride, he's going to give the same service as he gives us as he gives the Uber Black guy. And he's going to make the money and pay his bills. And I mean, I don't know how to answer the question any other way than that. I mean, if you're telling me that there are 2 and 3 guys that are going out of business because they can't make it work, maybe they didn't belong in the space to begin with. I mean, and that's pretty harsh, but I mean, that's the truth.
Charlie, I agree with Charlie. I think, though, if I could just kind of add on to that, what I see, like in our network, because we do a lot of network business and we're trying to do more, is that there is when it comes to rates, and forget TNCs, taking a look, we've discovered there's a lack of reasonableness, I would say, in rates, especially for shorter rides, and that's what's killing people and going to kill people. You can't be in a car for 15 minutes and charge a client $125. Maybe you can some of the time, but it's not a long-term model. And if an Uber is going to be $30 or say, if you're a purchasing manager or you're anybody, I mean, I would have a difficulty. Forget whether, how much weight, from a rational standpoint, if the ride's $30 and the operator is going to charge me $125, it doesn't take a lot for me to say, you know what, I can suffer for 15 minutes in an Uber and do this. And I think that people now need to figure out how can they get closer. And I hate to say it, Uber's doing it. And we hope, with AB5 and others, they're going to charge more. But either way, we can't be this far, out of screen. We can't be over here. You can't be that far off the realm. A longer ride is our friend, because then our rates become much more reasonable. But the challenge is if people look for you for that shorter ride or something, and you're out of the ballpark, then you're kind of done. Right. And you're kind of like, you're out of it. It's kind of like, an old adage, I don't know a lot of people, I own a gas station, right? And we have a convenience store in there. And when I learned it, I actually had to go to gas school. Talk about a great experience that was. I'm kidding. Anyway, what they said is, if you price your gas too high, your store is going to suffer. Because the minute people think you have really expensive gas compared to the market or other people, well, then they think you're going to overcharge them for cigarettes and for Cokes and Coke smokes and stuff, right? So it kind of is all in line, if you will. People don't really make purchase decisions at a convenience store on price, but it's the perception of if they've never used you, if it's not a neighborhood station or whatever. Kind of like going to a 7-Eleven, you kind of have an expectation of what it would be. Again, you're not making purchase decisions on price, but it's this kind of sense. People have their own sense of reasonableness. And so we're trying to make some changes in the marketplace that will be reflective of that. But I think that's what's going to kill people in the long run, is if they say, well, I can't do this run for anything less than $100, where if they'd rather have their car sit, or maybe at 80, they can generate revenue and consistent revenue. And again, I'm always worried because people will say, well, is Robert Alexander promoting, decreasing rates? And no, I'm promoting having smart rates that make sense, that are rationally logical. And Charlie, I think will agree with me, because his clients keep the car for 10 hours. Again, different part of the deal. as opposed to doing the 15-minute transfer. They'll do that, but that's because they're coming off a private bird and they want to meet the chauffeur, and then the chauffeur will pick them up later for dinner and keep them the whole night. Is that reasonable, Charlie?
Yeah, you know, that's interesting you say that. I'm trying to think of something constructive to say.
Shoot me down. That's okay. I want your opinion if you think it's crazy.
There's people that I don't, have to explain to them that I don't care whether they use the car to go around the block once or across the street. The car's got a minimum. And then, again, let's not make this about me. I had a client that came to me recently, a big private aviation company, and they said, "Hey, we want to sell jet car. We're selling jet cards, and we think we'll sell more jet cards if we can include ground transportation." And they already know what I charge. And so they said to me, "Is there anything you could do for us within a 15-mile radius of the private airport?" And so I went to, everyone I know, called your people, called Dave, and everybody says, "Hey, how much does this cost?" And they said, "Well, it costs this." And I thought to myself, okay, well, if I charge what I normally charge, it would be like 100% markup. So I added $100 to it, and I went back to the guy and I go, "Hey, does this make sense? Like, does something that look like $295 or $3 something, does that work for you?" And he goes, "Yeah, that's great." I mean, I think you have to do what you can do within your scope of what you do with your clientele. Right. I mean, when you said, "Hey, $100 might be too much," well, you're right. It might be too much, and the guy should get off his ass and go do it and get himself $50 and get a $20 tip, and he's got groceries for a 3 days. And that's the way you got to look at it. I'm always looking at a calculator, and I go, okay, if I can make $100 a ride and I can do 30 of them a day, well, that's $1 million a year. I mean, that's where I'm going. I mean, I'm not trying to set a precedent. I hope I can get to the level where I'm not just an hourly guy because I'm basically a specialist in a field. I work with special people, but I totally understand what you're saying. It makes perfect sense. I get it. But most of these guys don't understand what we're talking about. Not that they can't understand it. They're just faced with way too much, chaos that's just coming down their throat and what they got to worry about. And they're just super frustrated. And as I said, a really wealthy guy once told me this: not everybody gets to be rich. I mean, that really is the truth, and not everybody needs to be in business.
Every different definition of rich is different for everybody. What your definition is compared to somebody else. But I do agree with you that we are in a time where it's almost like everybody had to look at their business and say, can I cut it for another 10 to 20 years?
There's a lot of guys that have a lot of good business that they probably stole from some other limousine company, and they thought they could make a go of it on themselves. And there's the same guys that are going out of business today. And quite frankly, with their clientele that they bring to either one of you guys, they're going to do better that way than they are being in business for themselves. And I'm all for that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the reality, I feel for these guys, but
it's Darwinism, isn't it?
What?
It's Darwinism. Let the strongest survive.
Yeah.
And there's people who have jobs, and there are people who have companies. And I think the ones that have jobs, unless they've figured out how to make it work, they're going to feel the pinch. And the people who have companies.
Listen, both of you, I don't mean to interrupt you, Robert, but both of you guys could go to any one of the companies you do business with that use you and Uber or Lyft, that pay for the Uber and Lyft, and you could say, "Hey, give me the payout give me the data on all the people that use Uber and Lyft." And if you wanted to, you could go to them and say, "Hey, you know what? I'll take care of all that. It's going to cost you 10% more, and you get me." You could do that. You damn sure could do it. You could cut those guys out every time. And how would you handle the service delivery issue with regard to how they deliver service, as horrible as they might be or as dangerous as they might be?
Well, I think where we're going to, and Robert, I'll let you put your 2 cents into it, but where I think we're going to lose and we lost it with cabs. This is why Uber and Lyft, came around, was the on-demand. The reality is that people are less likely to plan out their day accordingly. So for me to be able to say, "Hey, I'm going to take."
At every level, my friend.
What's that?
At every level.
We know this. We've had this conversation the last 3 days. So what my point is that like, okay, so I have, executive sitting on, 150 California, and he just finished a meeting, but his scheduled pickup is in 45 minutes. He's going to call me and say, hey, Dave, can you get that car here earlier? And I'm going to say, oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I can, which we hope. No, I can't. Give me a second. Let me try to find an alternative car. Now you have this whole thing of like, let's just say your cars are so busy that you have to use one of your IOs. Now you're paying your driver. Your driver just lost a job. And now your IO gets the job, which is totally fine. The client's happy, but you're running into this on-demand thing or near on-demand. Now you could set expectations and say to your client, say, hey, you got to give me an hour leeway just so that I can get you a car. But again, things change in their appointment book, and their assistant says, oh, you need to be at the Fairmont Hotel in 5 minutes or 10 minutes, meeting change. Now it's, Dave, can you get a car? Okay, give me 1 minute or 2 minutes to find you a car. And it's, okay, well, they already took a cab when TNCs weren't around.
Well, why can't you guys develop like what NetJets does, which is they give their customers what's known as a sliding departure. So when that guy calls you and says, hey, can I get the car there earlier? You can say, hey, you know what? Best case scenario, it's going to be 10 minutes. Worst case, 20. Can you handle that?
Well, that's what I normally do when I have last minute changes. We normally do that. And we say, hey.
You could schedule it like that as well. I mean, if you're talking about.
You can't, because now you have the driver. Let's just say the pickup is, 2:30 and you give a sliding scale. We already have a sliding scale in place because we're there at 2:15.
Now, Robert shook his head. He said, you're fine.
Well, I'll tell you why, because someone like me, when I travel, every minute counts, right? And so if I'm saying I want to leave at 2:30, I want to leave at 2:30, and I can tell you at 2:30, if I leave at 2:35, I may miss the plane. That's
you're not the guy I'm talking about. I'm talking about the pop-up guy. I'm talking about that would otherwise use Uber. If he could just work with you a little bit, you might get to keep that business.
I mean, it comes down to what you were saying. It's delivering the deliverables. I mean, we have a 45-minute guarantee. We guarantee a car anywhere in 45 minutes. Out of the country, a little greater.
Yeah, we're good at it.
And I'll tell you what else we have, which every time I say this, people flip out. I said we have a 10-minute cancellation, and we never ever get called on it. But I'm telling you, people love it because the whole idea is you can get an Uber in 10 minutes. And so if you want to book a car. And how can you guarantee a car in 45 minutes but have a 2-hour cancellation policy?
Okay. Right? You're talking about the near on demand. Okay, no. You're not talking about pre-planned.
Today on SUV, you can cancel in 10 minutes because people are. I'll tell you why. People are not booking a car just so they can test our cancellation policy and book it in 10 minutes. If something really happens and you're trying to build a long-term relationship with somebody, depending on what it is, every client is different, every situation is different. Then they're canceling it for a reason. Where we used to have people to fly from Washington to New York is an hour flight, right? Mm-hmm. And so we'd have people go, hey, I'm taking the next shuttle. And they'd call us, 15 minutes before the plane was supposed to land. And we would go, oh, okay, well, we have to do a full fare no-show. They go, okay, well, then cancel my next ride. I'm not using you. And
well, how about the guy that calls you and wants a car, he's going as directed, and the pickup's for 2:45, and they habitually call you and push you off 2 to 3 hours. What do you do with that? And call you within the hour. Let's say 35 minutes, 40 minutes, 50 minutes habitually, and push you off 2 to 3 hours. What are you doing with that guy?
I'm going to put that car on something else, and then I will find another car when the time comes. And again, remember I was saying about building an efficiency model? This is not for everybody.
Hold on. I just want to hear you out. I'm not judging you. You're saying you'll push that car out to find something for him to do, and that you'll find another car for that pickup at the pushed out time, right?
Right. Unless, let's just say it's like a job where you have to have chauffeur information and all that kind of stuff. Well, then that's different, right? If it's just somebody being picked.
Tell me what happens when it's got to be a certain level of service that you can't just find some other jack off to do it.
Well, in 2 or 3 hours, I should be able to find
another guy.
Yeah, to be able to handle it. Right.
Okay. Right. All right. Hey, listen, I learn something new every day.
So you're saying this is a great conversation because Charlie and I had this conversation, and I have a different perspective. So you're saying that if a client calls you at 2:15 and says, "Hey, my meetings got pushed. I know the driver. I need to push it to 4:45." There's no penalty for your client for doing that?
No, because you got to think about it. is, and you know what, I got to make sure I'm giving good information, because New York's a different animal, and I'm still learning about, last minute stuff in New York where we had these policies. But for the most part, so they have a 2:30 pickup, right? Mm-hmm. And they say, we want to push it to 4:00. We go, okay, well, we'll see you at 4. And we're not looking to sit there and have that car sit and build them time. Now, every city we operate is a major market. So we have plenty of capacity and plenty of resources. And that's a factor of this. Now, if you're in a smaller market, which people say, well, I got to drive 2 hours to get there and I got to pay my chauffeur and all that. Okay, I'm not looking to start that debate. I get it. Go ahead, Charlie.
That's what you do in Washington, D.C., and I respect that. But you use him in San Francisco, and you put him through the same paces I just talked about, and he pushes back and says, sorry, brother, I can't do that. Are you eating the difference?
That's a good question. I mean, I am not close enough to know that someone has actually said that to us. I mean, with 2 hours notice, they should be able to.
Oh, 2 hours. We're talking about 30-minute notice. We're not talking about 2 hours. We're talking about 30-minute notice. The driver's on the way. The pickup's at 2:30. At 2:00, you get the call from your client saying, "Hey, I'm
4:45."
What's that?
Yeah, at 2:00 he called. At 2:00 for a 2:45, he pushes you off to 5. And I understand what you do at RMA. I got it. You have the luxury of being able to treat it just the way you said.
It's just opinions. We're just, this is a conversation.
No. The whole planet, the whole industry is watching this video right now, and I don't want to get this wrong. So,
all I'm saying is that you get your tried and true affiliate who always kicks ass for you, and he says, "I'm sorry, I can't do that. I don't have time to put this guy in another order, and that is not the way I run my business."
I think so. Let's just say it's a transfer to go to the airport, right? And now I'm going to say, okay, the car is there. You're going to have to pay 2 hours of wait time and blah, blah, blah. I think that's a tall order. And especially that's where your question was, how has Uber changed things? So I bill them for that 2 hours of wait time. Mm-hmm. Why would they ever use us again? That's what it is. It's having policies that push people to go the other way. I mean,
or you set policies to your clients that they understand the rules, right? That's another way of doing it.
Fine. They understand the policy and they're going to pay. And you know what they're going to say? Screw this. We just turned a $100 ride into a $350 ride. We're not doing this anymore. We're going to use Uber Black.
Well, and that's why we've come up with, cancellation, where we have we call it a late cancel fee. And that's because it's different here in the Bay Area. I bet New York is probably the same way too. Traffic it's horrendous. And I believe this.
Traffic sucks everywhere. Yeah. No one says they've got good traffic.
You're right. Exactly.
You talk to people in Boston, our traffic sucks. You San Francisco, it sucks.
Everybody sucks. I think I do understand your point, though. I think that there is something to think about. But again, you bring up the whole thing of when we do as companies to, learn from our competitors. Our competitors are not just in the same industry; they're in different industries. They're in TNCs. They're in all these other avenues that we can learn from, and that's why this is one of the best things that why I decided to reboot this podcast, was because I want to talk to people in different industries. Every other episode, I have somebody from our industry because that's my industry. This is my bread and butter. This is my love. And everybody says, well, how do you love this business? It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Well, I guess my dad put something in me that I love the challenge that we're in right now. Is it hard on my brain sometimes? Yeah. I can't think of any operator sitting today that can't say they have the bouting depression or some kind of anxiety, whether it be this small or this big, it don't matter. We're all going through it. And so if we can learn from each other and talk to each other and get advice, your idea may not work. I will tell you, Robert, I couldn't do that in LA and San Francisco just because my clients in San Francisco and LA understand that we don't do that. And we don't have the volume to handle that kind of stuff.
But Dave, here's the question. If you want to build the volume, if you have, I think the challenge is, take a step back and say, if you were the client, would you like these policies? And you're going to have policies that I believe work for the client and not maybe so much friendly to the customer. is really what it was. And then you get the high level service, whatever it is, Charlie's saying yes. And so the question would be is how do you make that work? So maybe you take it on the chin on that one, but are you looking to, lose the battle, win the war?
Okay,
And
we have to make it.
One thing I'm getting out of this conversation, only because it's you talking, Robert, and I'm sure me and Dave will discuss it because he does a lot of my work in Los Angeles, is that I think there needs to be a compromise, because my criteria is that if you call me within 3 hours of the ride, the scheduled time prevails. It's that simple. For a myriad of reasons that have nothing to do with how you run your business. But I do agree with what you said, that if you want to build a bigger business and you want to be more amenable to more people, maybe there needs to be something that's a little more palatable. But again, I don't own iron, and I depend on guys like Dave. So I got to call him up and say, hey, what is going to work for you? He might hold my feet to the fire. He might not. But the difference between what I used to do and what I do today is that I do have to have more conversations with guys and say, hey, not because my client wants to do this, you have to do that, but what are you willing to work with? Because I'm the one that's going to be paying you no matter what. So you definitely have swayed me anyway, with regard to talking to my guys about what's appropriate behavior on our side.
I mean, here's the simple litmus test. It's not complicated at all. I challenge everybody who's watching this, go back and look at forget post-pandemic, look at your sedan and SUV revenue. Mm-hmm. And if it's flat or slightly growing, well, that's not a long-term plan, because it's not going to get easier. Maybe for a little bit before there's a vaccine, but all in all, if it's not growing or if it's going down, then something has to change. Right. And that's just simple math. If it's growing at a rate you're happy with, 10, 20% a year, just your sedan and SUV work I'm talking about, then do what you're doing.
Yeah. And
right.
I do think there's something in, again, I can sit here and say, I think my way is the right way because it's worked for me. But what you just did, and I think this is another thing we talked about, the pandemic, you have to start looking at your business differently and having a different perspective like yours, Robert. I know working with Charlie and a lot of these affiliates or some of the affiliates I do, they hound me on my minimums. My cancellation policies is really high compared to other people. And it made me really think about, okay, am I high even to my own clients? Is it realistic to my clients? So if it's unrealistic to my clients, how can it be realistic to my affiliates? And then now bringing what you just brought up, I just have to start thinking about, okay, maybe it is okay to do the minimums at 20, let's say double the price. If it's a $30 trip through Uber, it's $60 flat from, for urban BCN, but you get a car service, you get a chauffeur, the driver's there 15 minutes early. They're going to see that. And then maybe they're going to, the question is, I can say that okay for myself, right? But if I'm trying to build, a connection with this company, I've got to be able to find partners in other cities that are willing to take it, like you said, in the chin for the volume of quality work. And I think that's where but don't. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think the challenge people run into is they get really stuck on the 20 and not the 80. So the scenario I presented may only happen once out of every 500 rides. Right.
But don't make your policies all warped out over the one ride. Worry about the 499 that you're billing that's now going to be 750. So, I that's where I think, to me, you look at the big picture, because we don't have people who are canceling rides that often within 10 minutes of the pickup time or whatever it would be. It just doesn't happen. And so when it does, maybe it's one out of every 5,000 rides. Why punish them? Because now you're going to own them because it's reasonable. And you go into an account and tell them you can do that. They're going to go, well, that's pretty unique.
Right.
But they're not looking to cancel the car because of your policy. They're looking to cancel cars they have a reason to. And I don't want to give them a reason to say, cancel the car. I'll cancel the car. I think my meeting might run over. I'm going to cancel the car 2 hours out. So they follow your policy. They cancel the car. The meeting only ran 30 minutes late, where if you could have adjusted, you'd still be driving to the airport. Now they're using another means to get there. So
No, I think I know we kind of went on a tangent on other things, but I think it does bring up, these are good conversations that I think a lot of operators need to listen to. And I want to kind of end with just one question I've been asking a lot. What's one piece of advice, Charlie first, that you would give operators in the space right now that you've kind of lived by?
He tells me to charge more a lot. I like that about him. He'll call me and say, Robert, you really could bill more for that ride. Exactly. I like that about him. Yes, that's true.
Since Robert, well, I'm not sure if you mentioned this on the off the air or on the air, but I don't look at it as, like, hey, how much can I charge? I look at it as that, fortunately for me, my clients understand, who I am, my history, and they understand an expertise. And what they've actually bought off on is that I can get better service out of you guys than they can go in direct. And that costs money.
I agree with that.
And so it's not, and that's all, and it's solely just because it's the only thing I know how to do. And I've been doing it for so long. But I don't look at it and go, God damn, how much money can I charge? Because quite frankly, even in my space, let's call it the Limo Link Savoya SLADE space, it can be competitive, and you certainly gave me something to talk to Dave about.
But Robert, appreciate that shit.
Yeah. But anyway, I guess I'm just old and I forgot the goddamn question.
Well, what advice would you give people? But the thing is if you said to me, I'm not, and I hope I don't come across as professing that anything I'm saying is right or wrong. It works for us. It may not work for, but more importantly, if it gets people to ask the question just to look at it, then to me that's a good thing.
The only piece of advice I could give anybody, well, we talk about money all the time, but if don't put money first, put the customer first. And if you take care of the customer is going to take care of you, and you is going to be the company, and the company will take care of everybody. So you got to constantly think, how do I take care of the customer? I got to take care of the customer.
Robert, come after that one now.
What do you say?
That's exactly what I said.
Well, that's what that. I mean, I know that's what you just said, but it isn't anything that we don't know and we don't do. But I mean, the reality of it is that you can't go to work every day thinking I need to make so much money. You got to go to work every day is that I'm going to be the best service delivery provider I can be, and the money will come at whatever level you're at.
Rory McIlroy, the golfer, said it best. He said, are you thinking about how much money you might win if you win, the FedEx points for $10 million? He goes, I'm well beyond playing for money. I'm playing for victories, and I'm playing for pride. And that surmised it right there, because he'd been successful enough, and that's what it would be. And so Dave was talking about getting this business in your blood, so to speak. I mean, the highs are incredibly high and the lows are really low because the highs are so great. So when things go well and your clients say they love you, or you pull off a big event or something, it's a great, great feeling. And when you're late for the wrong client, it really, really stinks. And so it's that passion, you have to do it. And I think, to answer kind of Dave, you have to do it efficiently, and you have to understand your numbers and make sure that, you can do it well so that you make a good living. And so that, when times are tough, you have something to kind of a model that works or that you can improve upon. And profitability is very, very important. And I think, what I've learned in this, a lot of companies I thought were charging a lot aren't charging as much as you think they are. And that a lot of companies are just kind of moving money around, and they're not thinking about a solid business plan and how do I run my company efficiently. They can tell you, I've got XYZ employees and this many cars. Who cares?
Doesn't matter.
Who cares? Do you have the right number of people to answer the phones, to dispatch a ride? And do you have the right number of cars to service what you need? So at the end of the day, you have a profitable company is really, I think, the most important thing. And thinking about that every day and how you can make it more efficient and make it better. Because if you make it more efficient, then you worry less about picking people up and more about the in-car experience for people. And the laws of nature, the more attention you give to something, theoretically, it will do better and get better. So if I said, spend 9 hours a day thinking about how you can make the in-car experience better, it's going to improve just from the energy it's put on it, as opposed to how are you going to make payroll or how are you going to dispatch 5 rides or whatever. So I would say, build your business around, to what Charlie said, around the customer, and make sure you have the resources and the energy and the time to think about how to do these things as well as you can.
Well, I am, I didn't know what to expect from this podcast because my mind was all over the place with questions I wanted to ask. But I will tell you that both of you guys just dropped a knowledge bomb on a lot of people, and especially me, on just thinking a little bit different than I was an hour and 20 minutes ago. So I thank you for that. And I think that anybody who was listening to this needs to take a moment and really take what you guys just said and really start thinking about that, because I think there's a lot right now going on, even on the social medias, of people bashing the NLA or people bashing Charlie, who he is. Who gives a shit? Who gives?
I can't do that. I'm president of the NLA. I may be able to think it, but
I'm saying it not as a representation of NLA, but we need to stop fucking talking about each other in a bad way and start working with each other to make this industry stronger out of all of this.
Hey, Dave, it isn't just our industry. Go on Facebook, Instagram.
It's every industry.
Yeah, and the whole world is talking crap about each other.
Yeah.
How about just take one day and just post something nice?
Exactly.
Anything random that doesn't have anything to do with the Democrats or Republicans or the virus or who's beating the hell out of who. Just something nice,
Yeah. I mean, I honestly am leaving out of this podcast. I want to believe 5% smarter, which is really nice because that's a lot for me during these times right now. But Robert, I'm going to give, Charlie and I talk a lot, but I got to give you a lot of credit. You're not wearing a suit, one. Two, I don't want to know if you're wearing shorts or jeans, but I'm assuming shorts.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you know what? Look at this. So we know you're about to go work out because you told us. So Bill Faith, see, I got him in t-shirt and shorts. What now, bud? Just joking. Charlie, I know you're going to go on your Peloton also in a few minutes. Go do your 45-minute ride. Thank you guys so much for your time. Robert, where can people find you if they've got any questions or anything like that?
Two things if I could. One, Alexander at rmalimo.com is probably the best way, and I'm pretty good with email, so shoot me a note, and glad to follow up with any questions or something. I prefer that. A lot of people seem to Facebook message me or something, and I'm just not as good. Because otherwise, if I don't have the answer to the question, I can forward it to somebody and get the answer.
Perfect.
And you talked a little bit, and so I got to put my NLA hat on for 30 seconds if that's okay. Is it?
Of course.
So you were talking about the NLA bashing, and I'd like to think, from my perspective, it's gone way down, and I'm very happy about that. And I hope that people have appreciated that. The NLA has been working hard and trying to provide value during this very difficult time. And I hope that people, if you haven't already joined the NLA, you're certainly considerate in that what we're doing is really, and one thing I've tried to make sure that since I've been the president is that we're open and welcoming to everybody. And I think everybody has a seat at the table. For Dave, you were kind enough to invite me on here. I've only spoken to you, this way a couple of times, but it was a quick yes, because I want to do whatever I can to give back, because I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity. Talking with Charlie or being on something is always an honor for me, and I think that there is strength in knowledge and in open discussion. And some of the things you may come back and say he's nuts, but at least you made you think about it. And I hope that the NLA does that for people as well. It gives people the forum and the opportunity to feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves, and that they can be part of discussions and ways to stretch their brains. And hopefully the NLA is kind of providing some of those forums. And if we're not, we'd like to know. So we'd like to keep growing, improving, and most importantly, providing value for the members and the people that support it. That's all.
I did think you were nuts halfway through this, but you won me over. I had to stretch my brain a bit, but yeah, I'm there. Thank you.
He's signing up tonight.
What was that? I couldn't hear you. What was that?
Yeah, he's signing up tonight. You win him over. Well, thank you guys very much for both coming. If anybody, we'll put some information in the description below. If you want to chow with either one, Charlie's information will be on there too. We already have it, so you don't need to tell us about it. Again, thank you guys. I hope you guys stay healthy, and we will be chatting soon. Thanks for being on the Blind Spot.
Pleasure. Thank you, Dave. Really appreciate it.
No problem.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.